there, and welcome to episode 102 of Killer POV. I'm one of your hosts, Rob G. from Icons of Fright. With me is Elric Kane.
Hello.
He's texting.
No, I'm just writing notes.
He's getting his notes out.
Making sure the show is going to be exceptional.
Waiting for the 11th hour. Jeez.
I predict this will be the greatest show we've ever done.
Wow. That's
just based on that note I just made. An annotation that will blow some mind.
Make greatest show ever now.
Yeah.
That is a bold and bossy.
But if it isn't, it will be the guest's fault.
Find out how to make show good.
No pressure on the guest.
And of course, Rebekah McKendry from Fangoria.
Hello.
Hi. So first and foremost, hey, thank you for all your feedback.
The feedback was pretty one slanted this week. I don't think we've ever received as much feedback.
But it was great.
Well, it's all telling us you want more.
No, but look, let me break it down a little. Look, we appreciate it, and we're not saying that we're cutting the show to 90 minutes because we got a negative review about it. That was just part of the conversation. The whole point is that we've done 100 of these now. 101 if you count last week. That's right. We're going to try to refine the show a little stronger. That's all we meant about
we will take off
shows.
the number, I think, is the smart part.
Yeah.
But we'll just, if it's 2 hours, it's a good 2 hours.
We're aiming for 90 minutes to 2 hours.
Exactly.
And of course, if a guest comes on that's going to go on a little longer, we will talk to them longer. That's it.
They just want to kill the lollygagging that happens at the 2 hour to the 2:20 mark sometimes.
I
get it.
That's it. That point where my bladder gives out and I'm actually like, come on, guys, that's it. We're just slicing that off.
Don't worry, we don't listen to terrorists. We will not curtail to the one iTunes terrorist. That will not be us.
Yeah.
But thank you for all the love. I mean, that was pretty incredible.
Yeah, that was, and we got a listener letter along with liquor and some screener discs.
Wait, where's the liquor? Oh,
those right there.
Enjoy your liquor.
I was going to say, geez.
Fireball whiskey.
Yeah, I know. The Fireball looks really good, but I'll take the bourbon. So it's Bart again, and it starts off, hey guys, it's listener Bart again. I put together another round of movies. If you've seen them, free coasters. If you haven't, then new movies. Threw in a rare Code Red title for Elric. Again, I just love the show, and this will be the last package, I promise. Bart, don't make it the last package.
No.
He's the same person who sent the sender and everything?
And
cool.
So this time he has sent us Electric Boogaloo, the Wild Untold Story
that's the
of
thing I've been
Canon
wanting
Films,
to see most.
which Elric has been asking me for.
I'm going to talk about today.
Oh,
That's
cool.
awesome. It's really good, but I'll let Rob review it. Primal Rage from 1988, which I have not seen.
Is that the Code Red title?
I think so, probably, because I don't think these other two are. And then Razorback, which is the Australian pig one, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's a cool
Rob,
movie.
have you seen this?
I think I may have a long time ago.
Might have seen it on VHS.
If not, you need to check it back out again.
Yeah.
And the last one, Wolfen, 1981.
That's a great film. But we discussed that last week, so don't pretend like you're ahead of us. Come on, Bart.
Come on. Bart,
it is a great movie, though.
So much, man. This is awesome. And I have not seen Primal
Primal
Rage.
Rage. That must be the Code Red title.
I keep calling it Primal Fear. It is not.
I watched the Code Red title last night. Cool thing about Code Red titles is you just have no idea what you're going to get, but it's never bad. I don't think it's ever been like, I mean, the movie can be bad, but the experience of watching it.
Just because it's so clean.
And I'm very curious, like, why these ones fall into that place where they can pick them up, how they pick them up. Code Red would be the most fascinating guest if we could ever get them here.
Well, I mean, like, we discovered that Messiah of Evil, they didn't really have to, quote, pick up. It was public domain.
Yeah, that's such a murky area.
Did they restore that one, though?
Yeah.
I mean, they must have. It looked gorgeous.
Because, I mean, like, the DVD that I have of Messiah of Evil, which probably came out a decade ago, maybe a little bit less, but it looks kind of grippy.
Yeah, compared to that. Yeah, it's just, I really, one day we'll get answers like that. Like, where do you find these titles that have fallen between the cracks? I wonder if some companies just take a risk. They haven't actually been able to find any chain of authorship, and they just go, you know what, I'm going to take a risk, and if we get sued, we'll find out.
Because
I think The Visitor was one of those titles that Draft House took the gamble on.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Because I know, like, that's the story that I always hear with, oh gosh, why did my brain just stroke out? Guy pretending to be in the movie, serial killer movie. Someone at home is like writhing in pain that they can't remember this now.
The guy who's pretending to be...
He's pretending to be in the movies while he's killing. His name's Eric. I can't remember it.
Not people. Fade to Black.
Fade to Black. Thank you. Fade to Black. Sorry, my brain stroke there for a second. But that's the story that I always hear with Fade to Black, and why it's never been re-released is that the chain of title is so murky on it, and no one wants to take a risk.
Yeah, Scream Factory would be so good for that.
Yeah, it'd be perfect. And I mean, it's such a cool movie. So
yeah, it'd be interesting to get somebody with attached to it who at some point knows that kind of stuff. Maybe a legal person who understands that. It'd be interesting. Yeah. Anyway, this week we usually start with Bekah and then me talking about what we've seen. But Rob said he had a lot to talk. So we're going to start with you.
So I'm going to try to do the bullet point versions of all these, unless where it's apt. Well, I have to start with Maggie only because, in all fairness, I can't review it properly because I didn't watch the whole thing.
I did.
Maggie is the new drama starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, where his daughter becomes a zombie. Me and Ryan Turek got together every couple of Saturdays. We get together for a morning movie over coffee, and that was the one we picked. And maybe 45 or 50 minutes in, we looked at each other and were like, all right, I'm done. Are you done? Because there is not a single thing happening in this movie.
Wow.
And look, Arnold's good in it, in terms of being an actor or trying to be serious, because I don't think he's a good actor. I mean, I love him, but this is the first time he's really showcased and tried to act, and that's admirable. But the problem is I've just seen too many zombie movies, plain and simple. The average person that never watches that genre might see it and find it interesting, but to me, it's like they're taking a premise that's about 10 minutes of any George Romero movie, or even an
Walking
episode.
Dead. It looked like Walking Dead to me.
Or even an episode of Walking Dead.
Yeah, totally.
And stretching it for 90 minutes. Right. I mean, there's nothing more to it than his daughter's infected and going to be a zombie. And that's it. So I was bored to tears. And again...
Have you looked into if anything happens after? Like if there's a big action scene?
And nobody...
I saw the whole thing. So I will chime in because I know Rob and I have a lot of overlap on our movies this week. So I watched all of Maggie, and I did not dislike it as much as Rob did. I watched...
I'm not saying I disliked it. It's just, it's not... I don't care. It's like...
Well, let me ask a bigger question. Do you care about Arnie post-comeback? Like coming back to acting? Do we give a shit anymore? Like, is that the same person? He's not the same person, that's for sure. This is the guy who ran would have been president if he could have been.
He's the only reason that the movie kept my attention.
It's the only reason the movie got made.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I know it was on the blacklist for years or whatever. And that's the thing. It's like, I think some people that I talked to about it, like in the quote unquote industry, were like, oh, everyone loved that script. And I was like, but everyone that loved that script, I think it was Ryan that was saying, everybody who loved that script has never seen a zombie movie. Like, this is going back 4 years ago.
And I wonder also if it's pre-Walking Dead.
Yeah, exactly.
My biggest thing with it is the zombie thing was just kind of an add-on. You could take out zombie and sub in cancer, yellow fever, plague. It doesn't matter. It's still the same story. The most fascinating part for me, and this isn't a spoiler by any means, is the whole movie is about her and her dad, and she knows the disease has a 2-week incubation period, so they know that they have 10 days before she goes full zombie. And so it's all about her and her dad and what they're doing during this 10 days. There was about a 15-minute segment where she goes out with her friends, and it's a group of her old high school friends, and she has the disease and one other kid has the disease and none of the other kids do.
And is this is this the daughter he has with the housekeeper, the house cleaner?
No, that's real life.
My other question is, does he punch a horse? No, because I only like Arnie when he punches a horse.
That 15-minute segment where it's the girl and one other guy in their social friends group have the disease and no one else does, that was the most fascinating 15 minutes for me. I mean, there are definitely some moments that pull your heartstrings, but
no.
Okay.
I don't think so. But
it looked, you know what I didn't like about the visual quality of the trailer is that it's that washed out look it's that tone that filter every movie's using at the moment, and it all starts to look the fucking same.
Witch used it too, but we'll get to that in a sec.
Yeah, don't do any spoilers on that one.
No.
So me and Ryan stopped Maggie, and he put on a nice Blu-ray of Day of the Animals from 1977, which I had never seen.
Yeah, that's cool.
And I thought was awesome.
That's redeeming for Maggie.
How the hell would they have made that movie? That movie looks like it'd be really hard to make with the animal,
Oh my God. I mean, to me, it was because I had just seen Roar, and I didn't think Roar was good, but it was fascinating because of what you're watching.
Right.
I think this is good and fascinating.
Yeah, this is a good movie.
How did they get these animals? It's the guy that William Girdler who did with the Manitou.
Yeah, Manitou, and he did Grizzly.
And on that note, Synapse has Long Weekend coming out now on Blue as well.
And Rob, he also did Abby.
Oh, that's right.
That's
one of my favorite screenings I've ever been to was with you at Abby.
Yeah, that was fun.
That was a crazy feeling.
But no, Day of the Animals is really great, and the Blu-ray was pretty fantastic. I forgot who put it out, but somebody just put it out again. And I mean, Leslie Nielsen is obviously now known for the Naked Gun stuff, but this is one of his serious roles, and it gets.
I don't remember he's in it.
He's he's very racist, and he says racist things to people the whole movie. And then at one point, the teams kind of split up, and it's Leslie Nielsen shirtless. It starts to rain, and he just says, you know what? I'll take what I want, and right now I want her. And he points to one of the young girls, and I'm like, this shit just got dark and serious. So if you want to see Leslie,
I love Leslie, like a midget at a urinal. I knew I had to stay on my toes.
Yep,
even Naked Gun 33 and the third.
Which is my favorite one. Favorite one.
Every single time there's this scene, and I don't remember which one of the Naked Gun movies it is, where they drive past these domes with these little knobs on top, and he goes, "Everywhere I look, I think of her," and they're obviously supposed to look like boobs. They are on the Pacific Coast Highway as you drive down to San Diego.
People, if you're ever on
every
a bus,
time I drove past,
say it's what's her name, Debbie, not Debbie Reynolds, it's Dolly Parton.
Dolly
Somebody
Parton,
always makes a Dolly Parton joke whenever we go by.
Every single time I drive past, I'm like,
that's
wherever
cool.
I look, I think.
No, that is a really good movie, and it's cool somebody put that out. I haven't seen it in forever, but I remember as far as animal attacks, it's kind of like the best one because all of them attack.
It's all lions and I mean tigers and like snakes and hawks and all sorts of stuff. And the Blu-ray is spectacular. I mean, there was one moment where thunder crashed. And both myself and Ryan's dog immediately jumped. Jumped. I thought a car crashed into his building. That's cool. How loud it was. It's a good Blu-ray release. And also worth noting, also stars Christopher George and Linda Day George of Pieces fame.
Oh, nice.
Couple. Yeah, they're in that one too.
Is she the one who says bastard?
Yeah,
I think she is.
She's married. She's married to that guy.
Yeah. One of the great moments in cinema.
The other one it is
pure cinema.
It's pure cinema. That is pure cinema. And the other one I had to talk about, I've heard about this for years, never been able to see because there's never been a good version of it until now. A Blu-ray came out of To All A Goodnight, which was directed by David Hess.
I've been dying to see that. I want to borrow that from you.
It's AJ's, but
of course it is. It's a Christmas horror film.
So he bought the Blu-ray, came over. It's from 1980. David Hess directed it. And it is, Kino put it out. Words can't even defy it.
Okay, I have to have this.
It's in that Pieces range. It's not good.
Yeah.
It's, and I don't want to say it's bad. There's just so much what the F moments in it.
Right. Is he in it? Or just directed?
No, he just directs it.
Oh, kudos.
And I mean, literally, I think it takes, and I'm saying I think it takes place between the span of 2 days because 90% of the footage is actually in the day, but they shot it day for night. So like, it's literally light out and you could see skies in the background. And I'm like, wait, is it still the same night? And AJ's like, no, it can't be. And then one of the characters pulls out a flashlight saying, I know it's late out right now. I don't want you to get lost out there. So it's like that obvious where you're like, what the hell am I watching? However, that said, there's some outrageous, amazing kills in it that are pretty wild. And again,
what's the basic conceit? Is that Santa's coming? Is it a Santa killer? What is it?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, there's a group of it's over the holidays. There's a group of kids in a giant house that I think it's almost like the Black Christmas setup. I don't even know why they're at the house, but like their boyfriend who flies a plane in there, like, it's really bizarre.
I'm already kind of there.
Yeah, I can't even describe. There's a bunch of kids in a house, and then somebody dresses up as a Santa and kind of sort of stalks them. I mean, that's the thing. It's 1980, so this is before Silent Night, Deadly Night. So this is the first Santa Claus killer. And there's a lot of elements and plot threads of Friday the 13th in this movie, which I found fascinating. And they must have shot it around the same time, if not before. So
did this get a proper release at the time? Was it a scene movie? Do you know?
I don't remember a box cover for this, and usually that's how my '80s movies fall. Is like if I can remember the box cover,
But it might have been before our time.
But I think a VHS of it came out and it was very murky and hard to see.
I'm googling it.
But this Blu-ray is it's sometimes you like I can't believe they restored.
Yeah, they're the ones that blow me the most away. Where you're watching something, you're like, wow, somebody took the time to that.
90 minutes of pure entertainment, though.
Cool. I'm all about it.
Okay, guys, I remember the box cover. You will as well.
I remember that. No, I remember that.
As soon as you look at it, you're going to remember it. Yep.
I just never saw it. I definitely never saw that one.
Yeah, and it starred Jennifer Runyon in her first role. She was in 18 Again, and she's the girl at the beginning of the Ghostbusters that Bill Murray's the cards and stuff. Yeah,
right.
So she's in that.
It's amazing. You're psychic.
Yeah. And super quick, let's see. Electric Boogaloo, The Wild Untold Story of Canon Films.
Well, hold on. I'm holding it, so it better be good if I'm going to watch it. Is it fun?
I think it's a lot of fun.
Okay.
We'll go into more detail about it next week.
Okay.
After you've seen
it.
I just want to say it's a fun movie. And
Does it compare to his Allsploitation documentary?
Yeah, I don't. You know what's funny? Yeah, it does. But I don't think any of the docs he's done since are as good as that. And I don't know why. It might be the films that the filmmakers and films that he's covering in the Allsploitation one. This one's more like if you grew up on Canon Films, it's kind of more like, oh yeah, I remember that one.
I'd also say, not to speak out of turn, so I won't say who it was. A friend of ours was working on a documentary about Golan Globus. He was working on it. He had them signed on. Basically, they were going to do it. At a certain point, they started getting controlling, and then this film was announced. without their participation.
Yeah.
They refused to be part of this documentary. And so Mark Cartley obviously went and made it anyway. And our friend didn't end up making his one where he had access to Golden Globe. So I look at a film like this and I go, I just, in general, in documentaries, I often feel like there's just one person that if you don't get, I don't know if you should make that film.
Right.
And for me, even if this is hugely entertaining, which I'm sure it will be,
It is.
I feel like shouldn't you have them represented?
Yeah, and they're a huge part of it, though. Regardless of, I mean, there's so much footage of them.
But honestly,
Yeah.
I mean, I disagree because I think that if they had been a part of it, they would have tweaked the tone and how everything is presented.
But you can still get an interview with them, is what I'm saying. I'm not saying get them to control it. I'm saying get an interview with these guys. Like,
but that's the problem is like once they sign on board to do the interview, they would likely say we get final cut and things like that, and then everything.
Well, I think that's what they would have done to
that's
our friends.
Deal,
probably. It's just a bummer.
Lastly, Rec 4. I finally watched that. I know you mentioned
How
it.
was it? I heard it was
you
kinda
mentioned
boring.
it a few weeks ago. It's just popped up on Netflix Instant.
Okay, cool.
And a lot of people are mixed on it. I think it's fine. It's okay. It's an okay movie. It's the weakest of the four.
Yeah.
It's my least favorite of the four.
Yeah,
However,
I didn't hate it. I just didn't,
Yeah, I mean, the thing I like about it is they do wrap up a lot of threads from the three previous movies. And that's all I really want.
Does it
is
explain the
Oh,
supernatural?
yeah,
Okay, because see, I will
everything,
watch it just to find out answers.
Yeah, it wraps everything up. I mean, I wish they did it in a little bit more, because they kind of stretch out getting all those explanations, and it is a pretty traditional, kind of straightforward horror movie.
Yeah.
However, that said, it's still a lot better than most part fours. So
it is, and the setting's still good. It's still ambitious. It's just there's something. Maybe I don't like the explanation. You know what I mean? Maybe I'm left cold. I did like the actress. I like that she was back.
She's great.
It's great.
From the
it's
original movie.
Just something about it was, I don't know. It did feel kind of part of the series, but not fully part of the series, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But you're right. It is better than most part fours. That's for sure.
Yeah,
we could do a part 4 challenge. I doubt there's many.
Exactly.
Many goers.
I thought it wrapped up the series.
Wait, which part 4 of Final Destination? Which one's that? Is that the race car?
That's the racetrack. I
Yeah.
don't mind. I will agree it's the weakest, but I don't mind it like you guys do.
No.
It's Bekah's favorite. I could just tell it is.
I know a producer will
Embrace it.
tell you that it wasn't. It was their worst movie.
He'll
too.
tell you.
He'll tell you it's
everyone
not his
soon.
favorite either.
So
So that's it for me. And I also watched The Witch with Bekah,
Yes.
which I'll let her bring us up to speed on.
So yeah, Rob and I got to check out The Witch, and I absolutely loved it. I would go as far to say it's one of my favorite films of the year so far.
I know Turk and a few other people who saw it at Sundance. At Sundance, it was really being touted as like it's going to be one of the best films of the year.
And it was, and I got to tell,
that was my only cult. I just at the last second was like, I think I want to see it on a screen. I don't know why. I just had this feeling I should, but
and I can understand that. I was expecting something completely different because when I heard that it was like a gothic indie art horror and about witches, I was seriously expecting a lot of like, am I being hexed? I don't know. I'm going to go look in brooding for an hour and come back. It's seriously fucking brutal. It's got some brutal stuff and gruesome. And I have to
story
echo,
stuff. I don't want to any story.
This isn't story stuff because Ryan already said it on the show. Best goat acting ever. There is a goat in it that, and Ryan already said this on the show, but there's this one scene where the goat looks at the camera and it's like that goat should get an Academy Award just for that look. I don't even know how they got him to do that. It's amazing.
I'm going to go on a limb and say the goat probably won't get that Academy Award.
Oh, come on.
I like that there's a nod
Black
from the Bekah
Phillip for an
Black
Oscar.
Phillip, that's his name, yeah.
Black Phillip for an
anyone
Oscar.
listening to the show today, a hashtag Black Phillip to
Black
the Academy.
Black Phillip Academy.
And let's see if we can get some. If stuntmen from Mad Max can't get it, then Black Phillip might be shit out of luck.
I do have to say, and I think we said this while we were watching it last night, as a whole, because there's only 5 characters in the entire movie as a whole.
Is it long or short, the film?
It's 90 minutes.
Okay.
It's brisk.
For some reason, I had that 3 hour in my mind.
No,
That
it's
some big
slowly
movie.
paced. It's definitely, it's got a really good build, so it's going to feel a little bit longer than 90 minutes, but yeah, it's brisk. But as a whole, there's only 5 actors in the entire film and 2 goats. And it is the best cast I've seen in a long time. The kids are amazing. The little boy who plays, I think his name is Caleb, is amazing. Yeah. Even down to the fucking goats are just, I mean, like, that's the one thing.
This is a period piece. It's New England, like 1630, and it's got... I don't know. It's a beautifully shot and made movie, and very sparse.
Is it an American film?
No, it's Canadian.
Is it Canadian? I can't remember.
We looked it up last night. It was like a Canadian production or funding, so I'm going to assume. And it was shot in Canada, I have a feeling.
If you want to see this, you can do what Bekah did, and you can go to Skid Row and get a burned copy from some
Why do you
villainous...
always make me so nefarious?
Because that's where she hangs.
It's so sad. We watched it with Morgan and Crystal last night.
So what else? What else did you guys see?
Oh my God, I watched all of Spring. Don't even give me that.
I've watched one of the most horrific films I've ever seen, actually. And I would suggest anyone who likes to just be kind of chilled to the core to watch 50 Shades of Grey.
Come on.
But I did watch it and thinking about the TV show that we watch, and it really is just, you cannot. This reads as a fucking serial killer movie. It is disturbingly grotesque in the sense the dude's got a fucking torture room, man. Like, everything about that movie just felt wrong to me. So I won't go into any more than that. It just felt like one of those twisted, weird little movies. It felt
like pulp to me. Like, I've got, just because I always like the covers, I collect pulp novels, and I've got like this series
but they're more fun.
No, they're not.
This wasn't fun.
I've got one that's called like Make It Sting that feels like it's like in the same vein.
But this is now. Those things are from the 50s.
Can we get off the 50 Shades of Grey? Okay, back to our horror show.
A documentary called Tales of the Grim Sleeper. I posted about it. You should watch it if you can stomach this kind of stuff.
Oh, right.
It's about a guy.
HBO Go, right?
It's HBO.
Okay.
It made me angrier than anything I've seen this year. It's basically they predict because cops didn't do anything about it in about 85 after 5 African American women were killed in South Central. They basically didn't really like try very hard from the sound of it because of the kind of they're crack addicts.
Yeah.
And basically they predict he was only caught like 2 years ago. They predict there could be up to 100 woman from that area.
Wow.
And then it's interviews with all his friends and all these people like, yeah, he's a good guy. Actually, when I think about it, there's this one time. And you just start seeing a portrait. And what's most disturbing about the film is not the monster who's the killer. It's kind of like society. It kind of is a perfect microcosm for everything that's happening in America right now. With the racial politics, and it's scary because you realize people don't care what's happening there. As long as they don't have to police it, he's kind of taking care. So anyway, interesting movie, but grim as hell.
This is the shit I can't watch. Like, I can't watch the stuff like that because it really disturbs me.
That one was really tough. That was probably the hardest thing I've watched this year in terms of just going, people are people, man. There's humans with dreams. It doesn't matter if you're crackhead, you're saying this guy's a crackhead and it's fine. It's still somebody you've extinguished. Anyway, a couple things I will talk about. I rewatched Creature I hadn't seen it in like a long time. It's a flawed movie, but
directed by
William Malone.
Oh, who's okay?
Yeah. So that was, and I'm not going to review it till we're talking about it. 2 movies that I do want to talk about, and they're both so fun. I hadn't seen this since I was a kid. Duel by Steven Spielberg. Mm-hmm. This is like really one of my favorite movies. I've got to say, like, of Spielberg's whole filmography, that and Jaws are like a really interesting pair because they're really the same kind of thing, but Duel's the version with like no storyline. So Jaws is like got all these characters and story and stuff to care about. This is just like the pure cinema version, and it is so good. Like, it was on El Rey Network, which is just killing it. Like, so almost every night there would be something I would DVR like, oh, I should watch that again. Yeah. And so I watched it again. It's so freaking good. It's just like, it's literally, and I really watched it this time. If you're seeing it for the first time, I really view it as like, it's a Richard Matheson story. But I really think this is just a guy having like a bit of a mental breakdown on his way home and imagining a truck's after him. I mean, it doesn't ever say that in the movie, but there's this real feeling, palpable feeling that the guy's crazy from the start almost. Like, he's really, and it's really good. So I'd really highly encourage you, if you haven't ever seen that movie and you love Spielberg stuff, this is like one of his darker and more interesting movies. And the other one is one that a lot of people haven't been able to see, and if you did, you probably saw it a long time ago. A friend of ours, Shane Bitterling, had a copy of it called The Pit.
Yeah.
And see, I always got it mistaken with The Gate.
That one's so weird because it's got like 2 different storylines. It's like the monsters in the pit and then the teddy bear. Is that the right one?
Well, yeah, but they're not 2 different storylines. But yeah, it's totally the right movie.
Okay.
They're still the same storyline. It's basically, there's a pervy 13-year-old, 12-year-old kid.
Who's really twisted.
Who's
I
really
remember a
like
bath
into
scene.
he's checking out his babysitter who's come to stay with him. He's checking out his teacher. He's cutting out nude pictures out of like books at the library and then putting the librarian's face on the body. I mean, he's a total perv. It's awesome. Like, it's a really fun movie. And then there's this giant pit in the middle of the tree, in the middle of a forest, where he takes like some people from Halloween. He goes, hey, I want to show you the pit, and just pushes them in at the start. And then down there, they're saying he calls the Trala logs, which seem like some sort of prehistoric, like demon type creatures. It is so much fun because it's shot in Wisconsin. It was a Canadian film, but it's all shot in Wisconsin. And there's just something about it where the protagonist being this 12-year-old who's just awful. An awful, not awful actor, but just awful
He's
human
just horrible.
from the first second, no redemption at all. And those kind of movies just don't get made. And he's really good in it. I had an absolute blast, and that might be Code Red. I don't know.
Okay.
Oh, I'm glad that finally got a release.
But it has. It's like $100 online, so it's not easy to find.
It used to be, I think, a double bill with Hellgate,
which is I am now.
years ago.
See, I thought I'd seen this
because
I was thinking of The Gate. I for whatever, probably because they're kids and there's a pit of some kind at one point. But this is a really fun movie, and just like, you're like, man, people don't make this twisted shit quite like this anymore. And I would highly recommend this one.
I remember a particular bathtub scene in that movie.
Yeah, the girl's in the bathtub.
Where he's trying to convince his babysitter, or his babysitter's giving him a bath, and she's like instructing him, her to do things. He's
asking her, but she doesn't do it. Yeah, he's really batting above his...
It's really twisted.
his weight. But again, it's one of those movies that you feel like you might have seen, you haven't, and then you're like, oh yeah, that's the good stuff right there.
But the box cover's cool too.
It is cool.
But then, doesn't he have a teddy bear?
Oh, no, yeah, and I actually still don't know. I would almost have to rewatch the movie to find out. The teddy bear, like Pin, remember that movie Pin? Their teddy bear's head moves a couple times on its own when he's not even around. So there is, and it talks in a voice, and I can't remember. I might have blinked and missed if there's ever explanation, or whether it's just
because
some
that's
weird...
why I thought it was two different teddy storylines, because it's the kid with the things in the pit and the kid with the moving teddy bear.
Maybe it's saying that connects to him to why they communicated with him. But either way, that is a good, fun, batshit movie. Cool. So that's my week, man.
Right on.
Cool.
Well, then there's a movie you saw. We should bring the director on and we can ask him.
I want to ask him about Klaus Kinski, so let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, and we are back, and we have a very special guest with us. Elric was just talking about one of his films, which was Creature, but also the excellent House on Haunted Hill remake.
Which is funny because people in our friend circle this week, before they didn't know you were coming on the show, and there's been this like little thing about, House on Haunted Hill is one of the best remakes ever. Graham Denman wrote this huge post on his wall,
really?
And all I wanted to say is, that's funny timing, because
wait till
you know it's coming.
We're topical.
But it is something like that is something I've always believed, that the best remakes are the ones that somebody has like run with. The ideas have stayed intact, but they've gone so much bigger and bolder with it.
If only we could talk to him about it right now. Actually, we can.
Hey, oh my gosh, look who's here, guys.
To the show. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for having me here.
Of course. The first guest to go without the headphones.
Yeah, I know.
It's a bold move.
He's hardcore.
So, we have a lot of ground we'd like to cover because you have such a long and rich history, especially within the genre. But why don't we start with the new movie? You right now have a campaign going on for the title is
Thallium's Box.
Thallium's Box,
yeah,
correct.
Okay. And what's the story with this? Is this something that you've been living with for a while that you wanted to make, or is it just something how did this movie come to be?
Well, actually, when I was making Parasomnia, my last film, I was actually that came out of watching Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, the 1919 film, and I watched that and I said, there's probably 3 good movies in here, So Parasomnia was one of them, and this was the other one, and the other one I've slipped me in my mind what it is.
It's gonna be your trilogy.
Oh,
yeah, I like it.
We've already filmed like 16 minutes, right?
Right. Well, actually, that came out of the fact that I was wanting to do the promo, put together a promo. And when I started shooting the promo, I thought to myself, well, promos, a real trailer is not made out of discrete shots that were shot just for the promo. They were the trailer. They're pulled from a complete scene. So I thought, well, we're in these locations. Why don't we just shoot those scenes? So for the most part, there's maybe another 10 minutes that's a throwaway because they just don't fit within the confines of what we're trying to do, but we wound up with like 16 minutes of finished picture. So, it was kind of a good bonus out of the whole thing.
You're somebody who, like, there's independent filmmakers who make films that are what I call indie, which are usually small ideas done very simply. But to me, you don't fit that model.
No, this is
like, I feel like you need $20 million every time because your ideas are bit like when I watched Silent Hill, all I could think of is, why didn't you just hire William Malone instead of rip off William Malone? You know what I mean? Like,
bring him on and let him do his thing.
So how do you but
Parasomnia,
you actually did push whatever the budget of that. I could tell you were pushing it as far as you could because the visuals are still really interesting.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, obviously, no matter what you do, the budget's going to show in some fashion, But yeah, I've never thought about limitations. I always think, just make the movie you want to make.
That's cool.
And go that way instead of just trying to. Most people, I think, would just make a movie with like 5 people in a room.
Right. Did you start, though, by going, I should try to get a studio involved? Or do you now kind of, after Parasomnia, go, actually, I'm going to just try to self-do this?
Well, I kind of figured, actually, particularly when I did the promo, I said, this is just too weird. The studios are just not going to go for this. I got mentally unstable lead characters and albino twin chicks who get naked a lot and have weird hobbies.
Game of Thrones.
There you go. And and that sort of thing. So I said, no, this is not going to be a studio picture.
So can you give us a general kind of plot summary of Thallium? And be sure to include the albino stuff.
In close detail.
In close detail.
I don't know if I can do that, but basically, it's about a guy he's an out of work a GM engineer, and he's now living on a park bench, and he can't find any kind of a job. He finally looks around and finds this place called Luminous Processes, which paints radium watch dials. So he gets a job at this place painting radium watch dials, which incidentally was a real place. And if you look up Luminous Processes on the internet, you'll find 2 listings. One's part of a super toxic cleanup fund, which is fortunately not my company.
Oh, wow.
That's still pretty badass. Yeah. You should take credit for it.
Yeah. Anyway, so he gets a job, and then he has no place to live. And this one guy who works there says, "Look, why don't you go work down or go live at the place called the Dark Curtain Hotel, and they can hook you up with a room until you can get paid." So he moves in there, and it turns out the entire place is everybody who's at the place where he works lives there, so it's kind of very incestuous. You go back to the place, and then there's this Professor Thallium. He says what his name is, who shows up across the way, who collects weird antiquities and stuff like that. And one day he asks him to watch his apartment while he's gone, and of course that's what starts all the mayhem. And so
is Professor, I'm just going to guess, my psychic prediction, is Professor Thallium Jeffrey Combs?
It is not.
Oh,
yeah.
Come on. You're letting me, would Jeff be in it?
Jeffrey is in it.
Oh, as a cop?
He plays
albino twin.
He plays a psychotic
cool. Even better.
Psychiatrist, which is probably
even better.
That fits just as well.
He's always really fun in your roles, in your films. So.
Yeah. Well, Jeffrey, every time he's always cast as like the mad scientist. So like in Parasomnia, I tried to cast him as something completely different.
He was the cop in that, right?
Yeah, and he loves film noir.
Okay,
so I said, look, be a film noir cop in this. And he said, okay, great.
Oh, that's fun.
So he had big fun doing that, so...
Wow.
And so how's the campaign? And what made you think of doing a campaign? I don't know, you didn't do that for Parasomnia, right?
No, not at all.
That's pre-fundraising.
Actually, no, I learned my lesson on Parasomnia.
Okay.
I broke the number one rule of filmmaking, which is never spend your own money. So I mortgaged the house, and a friend of mine, he wanted to put money into a movie, so we both financed the whole movie. And
do you still have the house?
I do. Yeah, I'm still paying.
You're lucky.
And I'm still paying for Parasomnia, which I'll probably pay for till I'm dead. And, and the truth is, it doesn't bother me at all. I'm very happy that I made that film, and, whatever it cost is fine. So,
oh, good.
But I'm just not going to do it again.
Yeah. Listen. So did you have somebody kind of instruct you how to go about setting up something like this, or were you already savvy to? Well,
no, actually, in fact, that's been our problem is really, I'm only now, we're halfway through the campaign, and I'm only now sorting out actually how you should actually maneuver this and make it work and stuff like that. Because a lot of tricks I was unaware of.
I've heard people say that running an Indiegogo or a Kickstarter campaign is just as big as a production as an actual movie. Like it takes just as much prep and just as much, maneuvering and a team and things that have to be. It's like a full press package that has to go into it.
It's a full-time job, and we're working 1 million hours a day, and it's crazy, and we're getting a lot of press, It's been very hard to pull money out of people, you know, and I think it's because, the Kickstarter thing's been out for a while, and, sort of the blossom is fading there.
At some point it seems like if it was just as simple as without all the other benefits, simply as it's $15, everyone's the same amount, but it gets you into the movie when it's out.
Right.
Yeah,
and that way you get the money up front. And
that's what
to me
Matt
it would
Curry
work.
Holmes always called it, was buying your ticket before the movie is
exactly.
made.
It seems like that would be a really fair way to go about it,
It would. What you have to be careful with is because I saw that some friends of mine were successful raising the money, but I can see down the road they're going to have a nightmare trying to fulfill all of the rewards that they've put out there, because what you don't want to do is you're not trying to be a store, just selling stuff at retail price, because you spent all your time doing that stuff instead of making the movie, So
I want to ask you, what's your connection with Robert Parigi? Because I saw him listed on your Kickstarter. He's a friend of ours.
Yeah.
For a lot of people listening, he's one of the producers on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and we've known him. I mean, he looks like he's in a William Castle movie.
He looks like he should be. Like when
know.
I first saw him, he came to Horror Trivia one night, and I was like, "Who's this guy? He's obviously famous, and I don't know who he is." And then
My all-time favorite Halloween costume of all time was I went to it might have been Stacey Wilson's Halloween party, and he was the perfect Tingler. Perfect.
Oh, that so makes sense.
It was just, I mean, it was like Vincent Price had just walked out, and he was holding a giant centipede thing, and I always loved that. And also, he made a really great movie. I mean, it's a really interesting, weird,
Object.
it's a really strange little movie, and I like it a lot.
Yeah, I don't think he gets enough props for the stuff that he's done. I mean, first of all, Robert, I mean, he's one of the wackiest people that I know.
And one of the smartest, right?
And smartest,
It's
yeah. I mean, he
yeah.
really knows horror. He's a dyed-in-the-wool horror person, loves it, breathes it, you know. And
I've been meaning to ask him to come on, too, because
He's a good guy.
He's the kind of guy I remember asking one of these conventions where you would ask him, what's your favorite monster? And somebody goes, oh, I like Creature of the Black Lagoon, right? And then ask him the same thing. He talked for about 3 minutes about the history, connecting Da Vinci to Frankenstein's monster, talking about like the origins of man. And I'm looking at him going, holy shit, man. Like,
actually, just yesterday, I posted up Vorkapik's Fury segment. Vorkapik, the editor, and the Fury segment being like the from the movie way back, and he immediately responded and posted all of these other Vorkapik trailers and things. And I was like, who the fuck knows this shit? He's amazing.
Robert's like an encyclopedia of horror. He really is,
fun.
you know, and he's a great idea, man. He's just got all kinds of, you know, cool ideas and stuff. And he seems to be obsessed with tumors for some reason. I haven't figured that out.
some Cronenberg thing. Yeah.
That's our topic for when he's on.
Well, it seems like because I noticed he was listed as producer, and it seems like in this industry now, especially if you're going it solo, you want people who are positive around you. And one thing about him, I've never seen him talk negatively about people around him. Like he always seems to be like trying to think positively about things, you know?
Yeah, well, he's very enthusiastic. I mean, you know, he makes things happen, and you know, he works as a producer on, like I said, on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and you know, he's been on a lot of stuff, and he's really kind of a go-to guy. I mean, he really, you know, he's an interesting guy. Yeah. So
great.
That's cool.
And if you get a chance, everyone should see his movie, you know?
Yeah. See Love Object.
Love Object, yeah.
You've never worked together, though, on a film. This is the first time?
No, I helped him a little bit. I shot just some second unit shots for Love Object, but that was about it. And, but no, we've actually never worked on anything. We did sort of collaborate briefly on Fear.com. He did some script stuff on Fear.com.
Okay.
But of course, half the planet did. So
I hadn't noticed when I could not tell that. So we will post the Kickstarter and all that, so you don't have to worry about telling us what the website's at. But if there's any cool perks that you want to plug, let us know. Anything particular, like the $500,000 version?
Well, you get to spank her if you.
For $500,000, that's pretty good. There's no one in the room that he pointed at. She's just some ghost.
He just pointed at a ghost. We don't know what's going on. So
we want to go all the way back.
Let's go back.
Well, I want to go to the beginning because I don't know a lot about this. Forgive me if you've done some extensive interview about your history with Don Post Studios or not. But
yeah, this is where I wanted to start.
But I read that you started out actually as a musician, and then early on started working with Don Post. So what's that all about?
Well, let's go way back then. Sorry. Let's take the way back machine. You know, when I was a kid, I saw Creature from the Black Lagoon. My mom took me to see Creature in 3D. I don't know what possessed her. I was like this tall, you know, I could barely see over the table here. And, you know, scared the bejesus out of me. But then I started like making little monsters, making little films. I'd been making films really up until the Beatles came out, and then I sort of became Beatle obsessed and had a band for a while. And
was that in L.A. where you raised?
No, this is back in Lansing, Michigan.
Okay.
So yeah. So that was you know, sort of my introduction to all horror. But I was, you know, a famous Monsters of Filmland kid, and you know, and actually, I was very into like calling people up. I don't know what possessed me. Like I found like Paul Blaisdell's phone number. I called him up. I called up Bud Westmore, and actually I just posted my interview I did with Bud Westmore when I was 14. Wow. And it's on YouTube right now.
Wow.
And it's pretty hilarious. But yeah. So anyway, you know, I started then when I first came out here, which I was like 19 years old. A friend of mine wanted to do a Halloween show. And so I sculpted him a Pickman's Model monster from the TV show. What was it? this Rod Serling show. What is it?
Oh, Twilight Zone?
No. The one he had after that.
The Night
Gallery.
Yeah.
Night Gallery, exactly. Yeah. So I did that, and then I was looking for work because I knew the music thing wasn't going to work out, because I took a self-assessment. I said, you suck, so let's move on. So then I went over to Don Post Studios, and I was obsessed with Robbie the Robot, which you may know. And I built a replica of Robbie and took it over to Don Post Studios, I think to get some materials or something. And they offered me a job there, and I started working, painting Frankensteins and stuff, and then worked my way up and started sculpting masks and so forth. So.
And that Robbie's still in your house, right?
And
I sold the one I made, and then I wound up with the original. Yeah,
so that's the original I've seen. Okay.
Yeah, so now I have the original, and which I bought in 1980.
How do you? Okay, and we will post a video of this that I had from way back this week in horror, where you showed us your entire incredible collection. But how do you start a collection like that? Like, was it just like that because you had made some stuff and traded, sold stuff, and
I guess I had a couple little pieces, sitting on my shelf, and people would come over and say, well, that's pretty cool. And I saw this or that, and would you like to see it? And I'd say, sure. And I'd go over to somebody's house, or they'd bring something over, and I'd say, do you want to sell that? And then, and I'd, this is a time when you buy the stuff for $5-10, so. I mean, you could buy a one-sheet to Creature from the Black Lagoon. I think I paid $7 for the one.
Oh my God!
Wow.
Yeah, from an original one-sheet.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah, and I had a 6-sheet for a long time.
Oh my God!
Yeah, so
didn't you have one of the things I really stood out was wasn't it one of the original Alien miniatures of the space jockey or something?
Yeah, actually, that came up because I was. Again, so a friend of mine knew I was really into Alien. This is back when the film first came out. And after it had run its course, a friend of mine was out here in the valley, and there was a storage unit, and 20th Century Fox didn't pay the bill.
Oh my God! So Storage Wars is correct.
So you got a box and content storage unit.
So the guy calls me up and says, "You like Alien?" I said, "Hell yes." He says, "Well, there's a bunch of stuff here. Should I pick this up for you?" I said, "Yes."
Oh my God! And what else was in there?
Well, so I got the space jockey, the what you're talking about, the model of the space jockey and stuff.
Which is the actual screen used?
No, it's the one that was the art department miniature. They had it on display at when the film first came out at the Egyptian Theater.
Wow.
They used it for setting up shots is what it was for, but it was made by Giger and painted and stuff like that.
That's so wild.
It was all
and
very
it's in
cool.
your living room.
It's in my living room. And then also, at the time, I helped Bob Burns get some original props from Alien because I was friendly with the guys over at Fox by that time. And so I got from him an alien wall. I've got a piece of the derelict spaceship wall, the full-size one. Yeah. And then I got one of the original alien heads and parts of Veronica Cartwright's spacesuit. So
the most incredible thing I remember, and you guys will see that, it's the giant, I guess, what would you call it, the teleportation wall of the original Fly movie?
Oh, yeah.
It's it covers one of your whole walls and it lights up like a light panel.
Yeah, you got to be careful with that thing. If you got epilepsy, man, you just go right out.
Yeah, but I mean, how does something? I mean, is that stuff you've tracked, or again, just a happy accident?
Well, actually, this goes back to back in the 70s, the studios were divesting themselves of all of this stuff, and they were just selling stuff out the door. So 20th Century Fox had an auction, and a lot of that stuff they just didn't deem that anybody'd want. So they were going to throw it out. And if you walked over there and made them a fair offer, they'd just sell you the stuff. So,
that's why Hollywood's always needed that museum. The museum that's finally being built, or they say it's going to be, it needed that 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, it would have just been incredible to have
because
something
there was
that.
all kinds of stuff. I was at the MGM auction. I was really young at the time, and I didn't have any money, unfortunately, but they had great stuff. I mean, MGM had all their stuff all the way back to the Silence. They had stuff from Mysterious Island. I'm talking about the 1929 one. They had the helmets and the... and the submarines and stuff.
The museum that Elric's talking about, they're getting ready to do a science fiction museum here in LA and a horror museum.
Oh, really?
So the gentleman who is running the science fiction museum here in Los Angeles let me come and sit on the Star Trek Next Generation set. And they had actually found it in someone's backyard. The production designer had took it home back in the 90s with him, just left it in his backyard covered in a tarp. And then it was 20 years later when someone was like, hey, that's actually worth quite a lot. He had it at San Diego Comic-Con last year, and we got to go sit on it and everything. What's trippy.
What's amazing when you find that stuff, because I mean, a friend of mine found he was down in Santa Monica, and there was a garage sale, and somebody had this big tiki god, it was like 12 feet tall. Sitting on top of it as a tiki hat was the original flying saucer from Day the Earth Stood Still.
Oh my
gosh! And the guy says, "Do you want to sell it?" "Oh yeah, $75."
Oh my
wow!
Okay.
Did he get it or you got it?
I wound up with it.
Was that your best find? Like, I mean, you weren't there physically.
I think
but
Robbie is probably my best find.
Yeah, Robbie.
Do you have small children, or have you had small children?
You wouldn't be able to. No.
That would be my big fear.
I'm sure I must.
Because I have one of the piranhas from the piranha reboots, and my daughter always walks up and is like, "Fishy," and tugs on his fins, and I'm like, "Don't touch that, honey.
Yeah.
It's not a fishy."
So what would you consider? I mean, I guess the answer is probably Robbie, but then second prize of your collection.
Well, I guess the Alien stuff, because I'm a big fan of Alien. I think it's a masterpiece, and I love that stuff. And then sort of one that's kind of like near to my heart, is just because it's so old. Is I've got the guys who sit in the chair from The Devil Commands. 1941. You probably don't even remember. You probably don't even know what that is, because it's only been out on video, I think, like a couple years now, and before that, it was never on television, so you could never see it. So.
And this is a horror film?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm writing it down.
Oh, it's a Karloff. It's Boris Karloff.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and it's got I kind of knocked it off for my episode of Tales from the Crypt, the one I did in England. So I sort of took the idea.
Am I right or wrong in thinking for some reason that you had one of the original Maltese Falcon sculpt, like where they made a bunch of the Falcons, or is that wrong?
No, it's just an
imitation.
Yeah, it's just the imitation.
Okay. It's
one.
so really badass.
Yeah,
yeah, it's cool.
What's the furthest lengths you've gone to obtain a piece of memorabilia?
I
or
think,
do you not put that much effort into?
No. I had Gort for a while. The robot Gort from Day the Earth Stood Still. I had that for a long time, and that was kind of a tracking it down. But probably the stuff at MGM, because I became friendly with the guys over at MGM. Now, this is when the studio was being sold, and it was sold to Sony, and it was a transition period where the guys at the studio were Sony's taking over, do whatever you want, get rid of this stuff. So I got a pass from the head of construction to basically rape and pillage the studio, so I could go any place I wanted to and look anywhere. So Bob Short, and I, we went through MGM. We were like, climbing up stuff, and the guards just come back and go, "What are you doing?" We'd hold up our pass. Oh, okay, have fun.
Wow.
So it was great, and find all kinds of stuff. I mean, like I found one of the miniatures from the Krell lab. From the Krell power plant, actually, from Forbidden Planet, amongst a bunch of grip equipment, and you'd have to look. You'd suddenly look way up in the corner, and there'd be something, propped up there, and you'd have to climb way up there.
I've heard the rumor's true that you have pieces of the Yellow Brick Road hidden in your basement, because people are going to come for you tonight in the middle of the night.
I don't, but actually, when I got a lot of the Forbidden Planet stuff, there was a room full of stuff which I bought. In the room was the green machines from Wizard of Oz. All of his control panels and stuff. And
you still have that or not?
No, I never got it because I didn't have a place to put it. They actually offered me the entire bottom of the flying saucer from Forbidden Planet. I mean, the full size one.
Yeah.
And I went, yeah, that's great. I don't know what I'd do.
And I guess
put it in your yard and put flowers in it. It look really good.
But I guess the advent of eBay just changes that whole world, right?
I think it was actually Star Wars that did it. Yeah, because when that started to become very collectible, and then suddenly the studios went, this stuff's actually valuable.
Yeah, they just hold on to it. It's so fascinating. We'll post that video that we did way back when, because it's really beautiful stuff.
I want to talk a little bit about your first film, because I'm talking about Scared to Death, because I have not seen this movie yet, and I watched the trailer on the way over here, and it looks pretty awesome. And it's when's the last time it was available? Because I did a little research, and I think there's a DVD of it, but it looks like it's out of print and fairly difficult to get. So.
Yeah, Retro Media, Fredo and Ray's company, put it out for, I think it was the last time it was out, which was maybe 8, 9, 10 years ago. Actually, I just pulled the negative out, and I'm thinking about doing a full restoration on it, because it's so sad I've made a movie that needs restoration.
How young? You must have been super young those first two films, that and Creature.
I was really young when I made that, and again, it was one of those mortgaging the house and selling the cat and dog, and
Was that a decision you came to? How did you come to the decision that I'm going to direct film, going from a fan to a actual filmmaker at that point?
Actually, it was kind of from being at Don Post Studios. To set the stage very briefly, back in the 70s, with the exception of maybe John Carpenter and Tobe Hooper and a few other people, most of the guys who directed horror films hated them. Mm-hmm. You know, they just hated horror films, and the studio stuck them with making them, and they would just like, oh yeah, okay, I'll go make this. And working at Don Post Studios, they'd come in for monsters, and they'd want the stupidest stuff. I'd be sitting here going, no, we can do much better than that. No, this is what I want. Okay. So I finally went, I was kind of like, I was fed up. I can do better than that.
Oh, that's cool. That's the best reason to do it, right? Yeah. And did it work out for you?
It actually did. The movie cost $78,000. Oh, wow. We made number 16 in the charts, which a guy called me up and said, you know where you are? I said, no, we're number 16. I said, no way. You know.
Well, so it actually went into the red, that film, or the black, rather?
The black.
Yeah. I'm so used to living in the red that it all looks the same to me.
Before we move on from Don Post Studios, I have to, this might be rumor, but I have to find out if it's true. I read today that you designed the Halloween mask, the original one.
I sculpted it. I don't know if that's considering designing it. I mean, it was Bill Shatner, you know, so it was.
But that you were the one who had.
I sculpted it, yes. I sculpted it. It was actually, what it was is we got a license from 20th Century Fox to make the Star Trek characters, not because we wanted Bill Shatner or Leonard Nimoy, but because we wanted the monsters. We wanted the Goron and the Salt Vampire and all of those characters. And they said, well, if you get that license, you have to produce Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock. And we said, okay. So I got, life masks of both of them. And sadly, I kept the Leonard Nimoy one and not the Bill Shatner one, which I still have in my garage. But anyway, I used that as the basis and sculpted the Captain Kirk mask. And I remember actually when John Carpenter and his entourage came in and wanted us to paint one of them white. But most people don't know this. Also spray his hair black, which it's not black in the film, and I know that's because it was sprayed with. It was done so quickly, they just sprayed it with black lacquer, which just fluffs off. So during shooting, I'm sure it fell off very quickly.
So now, were they not at all concerned in that moment about the copyright? Should they have just made a blank mask?
Well, you got to remember, it was a low budget movie, and I'm sure they never expected that anybody would even care. Because that's the way you did it.
Oh, I mean, they do. They care.
and in fact, a lot of the Don Post masks, the other characters that I sculpted and did, wound up in television shows all the time, and nobody ever contacted us about licensing. And some of them were original characters that, I designed or Bob Short designed or,
Yeah, that's interesting.
So it was a different era then. You know? They didn't care about toys, marketing was never a thing.
So your film made money, right?
Yeah, actually, I think we ultimately made about $300,000.
At that period, that's
phenomenal.
But that was an era when you had the drive-in theaters and you had a burgeoning video cassette market and stuff, so...
And before you were talking about rape and pillaging MGM, so I wanted to use that as my segue.
Let's go back to that.
Rape and pillaging was going to be my segue to working with Klaus Kinski, but you all just blew it.
Totally makes sense.
I understand that transition. Yes,
I would like to just ask you a straight question, knowing nothing about it. I'm just curious, what was the first thing Klaus Kinski said to you when you decided to work with him?
This is a true story, and
with no prompting.
It's oh man. So let me just back up.
Yeah, I want to get right to it.
Somebody, the producers of the film Creature, which was at that time called Titan Find, called me up and said, by the way, we hired Klaus Kinski to be in your movie. No, it's more like, we hired Klaus Kinski to be in your movie. So... And this is 2 weeks before shooting, and I went, there's no part for Klaus Kinski. He's in your movie. So I said, okay, great. So I thought, well, I'd heard that he was crazy.
Yeah.
So
he wrote a book about it.
Yeah.
His biography is crazy.
So I said, I'll make him a crazy captain of the other ship. So that's what I did. And Klaus, of course, showed up, and he was 10 times crazier than the character I wrote. Anyways, for the first day of shooting, we're walking out to the spaceship set. It was out here in the valley. We'd rented a big warehouse, and he puts his arm around me and goes, Bill, I just want you to know when Natasha was 12, I raped her. And
That's his daughter, right?
Oh,
yes.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that my brain must have spun around in my head, and things went downhill from there. I mean,
that was the high point.
Yeah,
because he did. And the reason I don't know where I had heard something like that, but I know I'd heard about him and from his biography, where a lot of that was probably made up, and even him telling you this is probably just to get in your head.
Well, he did a lot of stuff just for effect.
Yeah,
but he'd want to have an argument between every time you cut the camera, not every take, but every take, actually. So it actually got to the point where I would just run from one take to the next. I'd tell the camera, don't you dare stop that film. You know?
And you're super young, right? Like, so you're inexperienced working with this guy.
Is trial by fire. You know, the only other film I'd made was Scared to Death, and that was all, you know, friends and stuff. You know, this is like completely trial by fire. So, but it was kind of good in that way, because after Klaus, I mean, nobody could rattle me after that.
It's like Kinski and Brando. If you work with one of them, you're good. You know?
Oh my God.
It's fascinating. There's a book called Kinski and Cut that he wrote that is just the wildest thing I've ever read in my life. Like,
was that the craziest thing that happened with him on the set, or did it get crazier?
Oh, it just got crazier and crazier. I mean, he had the makeup girl in tears. You know, he's going powder my asshole. You know, and he said
hashtag everybody powder my asshole.
I mean, he said stuff that would embarrass a sailor. You know, I mean, and. I think I had him he started on a Monday, and I think by Tuesday we called his agents. They were completely useless. They couldn't control him. You know, Wednesday I'm like flipping out, going, "What am I going to do? I need to finish this movie." And so that night I talked to myself, and I'm not really big on yelling because I don't think it's appropriate on sets. But I turned to the cameraman. I winked at the camera, and I turned around to Klaus. I just started screaming at him, and I said, I'm going to go down to B&B Guns, and you know, if you think you had it bad before, I'm going to blow your head off if you don't like hit your marks and say the lines. You know?
That's interesting.
And so he was a pussycat for like the next day and a half, and that was all I had with him. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's a lesson in there somewhere.
Yeah.
A strange lesson. But other than that, was the cast like as your first big experience with being on you're on a ship, you're shooting a ship, you're shooting sci-fi. Was everything else fall in line, or was it a difficult shoot in general?
It was a very difficult shoot for a whole number of reasons. I mean, first of all, it was very big, as you said, which it was strange because it started out smaller. And then about maybe a week into shooting, the producers came up, make the sets bigger, we have more money. And so we started building, which I was kind of upset about, because if you had told me that 4 weeks ago, we could have really made something out of it, you know. But as it was still good. And when we, so that part of it was difficult to deal with all those elements. But also it was the hottest summer. 1984 was the hottest summer that we'd had in decades. It was like broke all records. And the air conditioning wasn't happening. We had guys in spacesuits. There was all these they had this lava rock that everybody was walking on, you know, and it's you couldn't hear anything. You'd have 30 crew members walking on this stuff, crunching. At some point you just go, stop, you know. And then I remember a sort of telling thing is that I remember once we were shooting, it was probably 3 o'clock in the morning. We had 15, 16-hour days, you know, and we're shooting at 3 o'clock in the morning. And Harry Mathias, who was a great guy, who's the director of photography, he walked out onto the Planet set, and he's standing there for the longest time. He's got his light meter out there, and I'm like, why it takes so long to take a light? He'd fallen asleep standing up.
That's so great. That's like something that would happen in Ed Wood, you know? Oh, that's funny. Did you sculpt your own creatures?
Yeah. No. It was actually, and I felt kind of bad that I didn't, you know, because I think I probably would have done things slightly different, although, you know, it turned out fine. You know, it was, I had another crew actually make the creature and stuff like that. But it was such a big production, I really couldn't take that kind of stuff on. Later on, though, I did sort of get back into that. When I did my Tales from the Crypt episode, I sculpted the girl as the first character.
And this came out right at, I guess, kind of the height of the VHS boom, or just before the height? I guess 86, 87 is probably the height.
It was right at the
right around
kind of when it was booming, yeah.
And so did it do pretty well for you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, they sold the movie as a $6 million movie, which it cost, I think, actually $750,000. Wow. And nobody complained. And it did. It was it was number 8 in the country. Huh. And it at the time had a $5,400 per screen average, which, to put that in perspective, Star Wars had a $5,400.
Wow.
And it would have been huge, and I would have probably had a much better career had Variety tracked it correctly, because what they did is that since they were shuttling prints, it just showed up here and here and there and there and there, and it was doing huge business, but it was never accumulated. So nobody.
Interesting.
So I don't know how
you
much
were bankable at one point.
It was, but I didn't know it.
Too late, right? But then you do a lot of TV, right? And me and Rob were just talking off air before you came in about all the people who did the Freddy's Nightmares. There's just so many interesting people.
Many.
The stories I always hear sound like the Wild West of TV.
It was great. Actually, I loved doing those because it was a show where, I couldn't get arrested in those days, so to be on the show, I was thrilled to do it. But more than that, the producers, it ran at like 2:00 in the morning or something, some horrible time, so nobody cared. The producers didn't care.
I love that.
But there were a few people on the crew who cared, and it was great because you could try out any wacky idea you had, And I was forever doing shots where the cameraman coming, director of photography, he'd say, "You realize to do this correctly, you need a techno crane." And I go, "Really? What's a techno crane?"
Just make it happen.
Yeah, and I was like trying to do all these crazy shots.
Where were these shot? In LA or Canada or something?
It was out here in the valley.
Okay,
Yeah, it was a tiny little stage out here, in fact, it was like 2 stages. And what was kind of crazy is that I was at the same time shooting my episode, I was shooting the wraparounds with Robert Englund and, the little interstitial pieces. And those were in another stage. So I'd actually have to set up a shot, run over with Robert doing his piece. And then the AD would come back and say, "No, you come back to the set." So I was like, I was in great shape there.
Did you need a BB gun for him?
He was great.
Okay,
I was always curious how they did Robert Englund stuff for that. Because I just assumed because of the makeup process, maybe they did all his intros and outros.
Well, they did. They did
them
them in one day. They would shoot all for 3 or 4 episodes in one day. So, but I was like directing some of those. He was very sweet to me, and it's like I at one point had him wish my daughter a happy birthday, and it was great. He says, "You'll never make Sweet 16, bitch." It was great. And,
oh my gosh, that would have made my day.
Yeah, she took it back to class, and she was like,
"Oh my god, that's
the
so
queen
good!"
Of
wow. Did you just do one episode of that, or?
No, I did. I think I did 3 of them.
Okay.
Yeah, and with Wings Hauser and Mary Crosby and
can we go back to talking about Ramrod for a second from Vice Squad? The Wings Hauser, and I actually spotted him because I'm such a Wings Hauser fan. He's actually one of my favorite actors. I spotted him in your new trailer, the teaser for one shot, and I questioned whether it's him for a second.
It is Wings, and I contacted him. I hadn't talked to him in a million years, and we struck up our old friendship, and it was great. And
how is he? Is he in good health? And I haven't seen him in anything for a while.
He's great. Yeah, and actually that scene that we shot, the other actor in it, who's a young actor, he was like just blown away by Wings' ability, just as an actor.
He's one of those unlucky actors, I think, like in the 80s when so many movies are being made, he maybe got put in too much kind of crap, but he's always better, and he's always the best thing in everything he's in. Yeah. And I feel like he could have been so,
Oh, yeah. I mean, in a way, he's like Peter Cushing. He's
totally.
like one of these guys who just delivers the goods. He's great, and doesn't get the props that he deserves.
Yeah, and he's got a good actor's son.
Yeah.
Too, yeah.
Did you meet a lot of people on Freddy's Nightmares? We've had David Scow on the show, tell stories, Mick Garris, or did you know those guys already? Did you meet them on that, or was that later on?
Well, Mick I'd known from Star Wars days because he was the publicist when Lucasfilm was in a dentist's office over here on Riverside.
Wow.
That's right. He used to answer the phones.
Yeah, that's right. John Landis too.
And when we were getting the license, we were actually the first licensee of Star Wars.
Wow.
Yeah, and we got our license for like $1,000, and forever after that, Lucasfilm would give us the renewal for $1,000.
Like
because we were the first. We were the first people who said, "Yes, this is like really cool."
Do you have any original Star Wars stuff?
I have a couple things. I have like the original brochure that they sent us, and I have a Vader helmet, which is like the sister Vader helmet. It was unfinished, but they sent it to me as something to use for sculpting the original.
Wow.
That's so crazy.
That's really cool.
That's pretty
Which
amazing.
I kept secret for a long time.
You mentioned it before, so I just want to touch on it really quickly. But Tales from the Crypt, you did the episode Only Skin Deep.
Correct.
Which had, I revisited the entire series maybe a year or two ago on DVD, and that's the one that I remember as a kid that haunted me. And the difference now as an adult is I just assume that girl is hot behind that mask. And I was like,
she is.
I need to find out what she really looks like because it's kind of the,
I love that episode. Okay.
But you designed that as well?
Yeah.
Because it's one of the coolest, visual things from Tales from the Crypt.
Well, it was one of the things, and no disrespect to the makeup guys, but it was one of those things I just had in my head.
Right.
And there was no way of explaining what I wanted because I wanted her to be at moments beautiful and at the same time creepy. And that's a very tricky thing to pull off. And I wanted to be so when the lights were in a certain way, she'd look kind of pretty in that thing. And then other times she'd look really scary. So, and I found, I think I got a book on dolls from the 1700s. And I found a doll in there. And I said, well, let's make her look like that, because it was kind of creepy and stuff. So yeah, I sculpted that. And then,
wow. Well, it affected me as a young man.
Yeah.
You have to rewatch it. I get them. They all blur in my mind. They all come together as these little tidbits of each story.
Yeah, that's how mine are too. But as soon as you said the naked girl in the mask, I was like, holy shit, that episode fucking rocks.
Once you have either a synopsis or just one visual cue, you're like, oh, I know that episode.
I just remember the mask while she was completely naked. It was dark. I remember a scene where they're on the bed and it's all dark around her, but she's perfectly halo lit. So,
well, I'll tell you a funny story about that because if you watch the episode, there's almost no furnishings in the set, and I knew that the producers of the show were very big on making the shows look big and kind of like that they spent a lot of money. That was kind of the deal with the show, and I thought to myself, well, there's no way that they're going to let me do this. I mean, in my head, I'm going, because I don't want anything. I want it to be really barren, and so. So I sort of got together with the art department and had them draw up a whole bunch of drawings for sets that were just crazy big. It was Art Deco, this and that, it's and knowing full well that they were never going to buy it. So we took them in, and sure enough, I got this call. Bill, come into the office. We want to talk to you about these sets. And I said, yes. We just can't do this. This is just too big. I said, well, if you work with me, I said, I can save you a whole lot of money. And they said, okay, but it better not cost any money. I said, no problem. So I went to the art department and the set guys, and we just start taking stuff out. And they keep bringing stuff in. No, take it out, out. So it was just these big barren sets and stuff. So
wow. Now, when you're away from doing features for a while and you're doing lots of TV, how do you break back into, are the two, how connected back then were the two worlds?
Well, not terribly connected. And I sort of purposely avoided, I had offers to do a lot more television than I took because I felt that it was a trap. And the problem is that when you're doing television, you have to make your schedule, and the schedules are often very, very tight, which means that you wind up using shortcuts. And I didn't want, and you can fall into a trap where those become your standard mode of operandi sort of thing. So, and I didn't want that. So that was the thing so I sort of avoided that. But that, it is a kind of a trap.
So how did you consciously kind of get back towards making features? And I think it's House on Haunted Hill, which is such a, it felt, at least to me when I started in cinemas, like it was a big movie and it felt like a big remake. That could have been part of what you put into it.
Was that before or after you did Tales? Because obviously the Zemeckis connection.
Well, yeah, actually what happened was that Tales from the Crypt that I did was so well received. And God bless Bob Zemeckis, he was walking around Hollywood saying it was the best Crypt ever made.
Cool.
Thank you, Bob. I don't know if that's true, but thank you for saying that. And so that sort of propelled me on that path. And then I did one in England, and then a show called Perversions of Science, which was the science fiction. Which was, if you ever get a chance, that's one of my favorite things I've done. And
it's not got Jason Lee in it, does it?
No, it's got, actually the cast is great. It's got David Warner, Jeffrey Combs, and
I think I might have seen it then if it has Combs.
And Ron Perlman. And we actually have one of the last performances by Jeff Corey. Now, I don't know if you know who Jeff Corey is. He used to teach acting, but he was also in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. That's
I remember when The House on Haunted Hill came out, that it seemed huge. And it also seemed kind of pivotal, too, because up to that point, I mean, we just had Scream like 3 years before, I think. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of the falling of the slashers. And the 90s was not exactly a hot spot for horror, but that was like, it was that. And
that was
The Sixth Sense came out around the same time, and it was like a turning point.
Well, I remember that was the first, I believe it was the first of several proposed William Castle remakes. Mm-hmm. So I remember that was the big deal. It was like, Zemeckis and company are going to remake the William Castle stuff, and that was the first one, right?
That was the first one. Yeah.
Were you involved in the development, or did the script come to you already done?
Well, no, actually, I was in the development. What happened was they wanted to get basically team me back up with Dick Beebe, who wrote the episode of Crypt with the mask, and so. Dick was a lovely guy, but he had a little problem tipping the tubes, So he, after about 6 months, he turned in a script, which everyone hated immediately, and it literally looked like he probably wrote it like in the last 2 days before the thing, And so I got back together with Dick, and I said, look, let's watch House on Haunted Hill. Let's watch the original, and I said, let's make it true to that as much as we can, and just make it more. Yeah. And that was the thing. And I thought to myself, well, is there anything you didn't like about the original House on Haunted Hill? Because I loved the film. I said, well, I think the only thing that was disappointed me is there were no real ghosts. Mm-hmm. I said, let's put some real ghosts in it. So I said, let's not be the red herring as everyone thinks it's all tricks, and no, there's some real ghosts that are going to kill you.
And I think because most of that film takes place at the house, maybe all of it in the original takes place. I love that you open like with the roller coaster, and that's such a great idea of a guy who just designs roller coasters. It really, I don't know.
I'll never forget. I saw it in theaters with a friend of mine, and the whole gag where it's right after Jeffrey Rush and Lisa Loeb fall in the elevator thing, and then like you see like the roller coaster split. And everyone in the audience is like, because you think that they're going to fly off it. And then once it corrects itself, like my friend just turned and was like, this movie's fucking awesome. It was like such a great setup.
I'll tell you, that actually came out of my Don Post days. Because we used to have to go to like amusement parks all the time. And I said, amusement park, what they're missing is the fact that there should be threat of imminent death. You should be like thinking that you're going to die. And I said, what if we designed rides? And so those were some of the rides that I came up with, and when House on Haunted Hill came along, I was, let's put that stuff in, But I mean, I had another ride called Walk the Plank, which was the idea was a giant conical tube, like a hearing aid, kind of those old fashioned hearing aid tubes that would like maybe be 200 feet tall and like slowly drop down, and there would be a plank, and you'd make the people walk across.
Scary.
Of course, it'd be just black in there, and then when you got out, the plank would tip over, and you'd go falling off. And then because of the fact that the slope would be so slow, eventually it would just gently. You'd be free fall until you suddenly were gently.
I think you missed your true calling. Just to design a scary fucking ride.
I remember with House on Haunted Hill when it came out that it was the first time that I'd seen the twitchy movements on screen. I'm going to call it the twitchy cam.
Okay.
Since Jacob's Ladder, but in Jacob's Ladder even it was really subtle. It was only in like the dream sequences, and it was very quick, and it was just like, oh my god, what the fuck was that? Yeah. And in this one we actually got to see like Jeffrey Combs walking towards us in that style, and it messed me up so bad seeing it on screen because I wasn't expecting that, and it was like nothing I'd seen before.
Well, I think that probably was Alan Parker who directed Jacob's Ladder. I can't remember who it was.
I thought it was. Is it an Adrian Lynn?
It's Adrian Lynn.
Adrian Lynn, of course. I think that we were both sort of influenced by the same guy, which was Joel Peter Witkin, who was the photographer, and he's got a lot of photographs.
Oh, where they're blurred?
They're blurred.
Motion,
And I'm a photographer from the time I was like 12. So, I looked at those and I said, well, that's from being a really slow shutter speed and having the person move really fast. And I thought, what if we do that? And I started actually playing with that. I think on that Crypt episode was the first time I played with it, was the first Crypt episode, because I think there's a dream part where he wakes up and sees this black guy sort of twitching. And I thought, well, let's take another step further. What if people start walking around that way? And I thought, so I did some experiments at home. I used to shoot a lot of like test footage. And then when it came time to do House on Haunted Hill, I said, well, let's go for it. And it was kind of weird because, those shots when you're actually shooting them, they take forever because you're sitting there going, the camera's rolling like at 6 frames a second or 4 frames a second. So he's barely just going, bum, 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 and the crew's like, okay, and Jeffrey Combs like is walking very slowly.
I assumed you were dropping frames to get that. That's so cool.
No, what we do is we'd rehearse the scene at normal speed, and we'd have the script person hold the script supervisor hold a stopwatch and figure out how long it took to get from point A to point B, and then we'd say, okay, if we're shooting at 4 frames a second, we got to do it 6 times slower. So what is that? So she'd go, well, it's going to take him 2.5 minutes to get across there. So we'd literally be going, walking really slow. Wow. And then I told Jeffrey, I said, now when you stop, I said, I want you to move as fast as you can when you hold up the knife. So he'd go whoosh, like that. And the knife would come up and stuff, and then he'd go back to walking slow. And it had the odd effect of making his walk kind of weird, too, because you can't really balance yourself very well when you're trying to go, make those steps,
It's funny how a role where he doesn't really speak is actually going to end up being one of his most memorable villains.
He's really not in that much of the film, but people, they remember him more than anything, so.
I think it's hard to scare modern audiences and actually unnerve people,
And that character was an addition, new to your version, correct?
Mm-hmm.
If I remember correctly?
Yeah.
So was that the first time you'd worked with Jeffrey? Because obviously now you have a friendship and he's worked with you again.
I'd worked with him on The Exile, the Perversions of Science thing.
That's right. You mentioned
and that was just because his name had come across my list of actors, and I remembered him from Reanimator. I said, hell yes, got to work with that guy.
During the 80s when you're actually, after Creature and that period, what were the movies that you were getting, kind of feeding your fuel to keep making movies? Was it things like Reanimator, or was it...
Well, I mean, I liked a lot of the stuff that was going on. Yeah, Reanimator was certainly one, which I always thought was the perfect date movie. I thought you take a girl out to watch Reanimator, and if she runs out of the place, then she's not the girl for you.
It's ultimately a love story.
Exactly,
I agree with that. That's a good one.
But I think it's the beheaded guy.
I've told Stuart that a number of times.
One last thing about House is I watched a little interview thing you did with Rob Zombie on YouTube, which I thought was fun, and you were talking specifically about Jeffrey Rush and his decision to do the mustache thing, which immediately I just think like, oh, well, obviously it's Vincent Price and whatever. But you surprised me by saying, no, he was trying to be John Waters.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, like a John Waters meets Vincent Price. That makes so much more sense.
Yeah.
But it totally reads as Vincent Price.
But it totally makes sense as John Waters now.
And was that his follow-up from his Oscar?
Well, actually, he was actually, it was kind of weird because when I met him, he was actually at the time going to the Oscar dinners. Yeah. They hadn't had the Oscars yet. He was nominated. And I said to Jeffrey, I said, why do you want to be in House on Haunted Hill? Not that I'm, putting my own film down, but I mean, come on, you're going out for an Academy Award. He said, well, I'm rather tired of playing guys in tights,
Yeah, he's a really great actor. He's
Femke got to be his wife in the movie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, that's the other thing. You have a really great cast. As an ensemble, everyone's strong. So did you have much of a hand in that, or is it just typical?
Well, a lot of that was studio.
Packaging.
They on your first movie, they're going to tell you who's going to be in your movie. Yeah. Fortunately, Jeffrey was like on the top of my list and also the top of the producers list. So that was like a no-brainer.
Peter Gallagher is really
Gallagher,
good.
I love Peter Gallagher.
There's some good turns in there with the...
Yeah, and he was also really a good guy on the set. I mean, he really was very positive, and I love Peter Gallagher. And then the surprise, I think, was I had initially the film was supposed to be sort of darker and scarier, not scarier, but more serious, I guess. And a couple weeks before shooting, I started getting notes from writers from friends, which I went, okay. So that sent the movie in a different direction. I thought, well, we got to make it funny and scary then. So, my initial thing was to have the Pritchett character that Chris Kattan played. I wanted to have John Hurt play that part.
Oh, wow. What a difference,
which would have been a completely different thing. And they insisted on Chris Kattan. And when I got him, I thought, well, this is great, because Chris turned out to be,
fun.
And he did a great job. And, so...
But that film, like, we always talk about remakes, and usually it's like, oh, sigh, because people are basically tracing the movie, but with a bigger budget. Say it's a Texas Chainsaw Massacre. They're basically trying to trace the same thing, and it just doesn't work. This movie really is a different movie, and you said it best, you wanted to do more of it, and that's how it feels. When it was successful, why didn't that lead straight to doing, say, the next one, like 13 Ghosts? Or I know they made it, and it wasn't not a great remake.
No, actually, it was just such a hard movie to make, and I won't go into reasons why. But there was
technically, or just everything,
emotionally, and some of the people involved. It was. I said no, I just can't do. It almost killed me to make House on Haunted Hill. So,
but it did well, right? I mean, I remember it felt like it was a big.
It slammed into #1 and actually created the Halloween release. There was no Halloween release before House on Haunted Hill. So it did really well, but I just couldn't. Be on board for it. So
and did that hurt you by not being on board? Did it take longer then to like mount another film, or how does it work?
Well, the problem really was, and this is, I suspect Hollywood's always been this way. I was the biggest director in Hollywood for a week.
That's not bad, right?
Take it.
After that,
Icarus.
After that,
take that.
After that's who? What you do? And that's typical in Hollywood. It's like you can ride that thing for just as long as it's on the charts.
Until you can get your next gig, right? That's usually how they do it.
So and then I was just offered a lot of stuff I just didn't want to do, and there wasn't anything I was offered that I later said, "Gee, I'm sorry, I didn't take."
Right. And then you made the decision, like, I want to make a movie I've been working on for a long time in my own way, or was that how you came, or was it through frustration of trying to go through a studio system for Parasomnia?
Or was
that after Fear.com, of course.
Fear.com came after that, which was a different thing. And then that was offered to me, and I liked the idea of it. And the problem, I always felt the problem with that film really was that we got rushed into production because there was a pending Screen Actors Guild strike. And because of that, they said, you have to start by such and such a date. Otherwise, they're going to pull a plug. And it would have put a whole bunch of people out of work. And in retrospect, I probably shouldn't have done it, but that's what you do.
Was it the development, the script itself that got rushed? Or?
Yeah, just everything got rushed, and it just, I felt like we never really found the heart and core of it. And while I was making that film, my notion of it really was, at that point, was to make a tone piece, a piece that really is not so much about story and plot, but just about a general tone and mood that was creepy and
expressionistic.
And expressionistic, which is what I tried to do with the film.
Yeah, I think that it's one of those things. All movies about the internet are also really difficult. I have never seen one that fully worked. And they're often horror, like somebody's chasing some lawnmower man or through the net, and there's just something about it. There's a disconnect from watching something in cinema to what we experience when we're online.
I'm anxious to see Unfriended and see if that same thing prevails. I had a conversation with somebody about that it's hard to make a movie about the internet because the internet we're used to doing completely by ourselves. Like, it's what you do when you're by yourself, like in your room ready to go to bed or in the morning. But to be in a communal space and share the experience, it's different for everyone. So, and
did you explore the darker side of the internet while you were researching that? Or?
Yeah, I did actually. I went online and saw some really messed up shit. So.
Because I remember that Eli Roth during Tarantino, which I don't believe for a second that there was a real hostile website for a split second, and then it was gone.
And actually, I will say, there was a lot of stuff going on. My mom died during the shoot. My cat died during the shoot.
Oh, man.
So it was. And then where we were shooting, it rained every day forever. I mean, I can't remember.
Where was that?
It was in Luxembourg. And I think it went on, I don't think I saw the sun more than 5 or 6 times in the entire time I was there. So that affected the film as well, So it was definitely an interesting event.
And when that came out, it wasn't.
Well, it opened. First of all, it opened on the worst weekend that you could open a movie. They opened it on Labor Day weekend, which is historically a horrible time to release a film. And and people say, well, your movie tanked. Well, yeah, every movie that opened that weekend tanked. So, Yeah,
that seems really it seems really tough as a filmmaker that you really don't have any control over those big things with studio films. Yeah. They just choose these things for you.
Yeah. Well, I know why actually they picked that weekend is because, the publicity department at the studio was made up of all soccer moms.
Oh, wow.
And they ran it for them at 8 o'clock in the morning. You could imagine how Fear.com would play for them.
Perversion.
Yeah. I remember I was outside and they were like shooting daggers at me. I was like, oh man, I'm in for it now.
Did it film did you have to censor anything? Were there extra imagery that you shot just to be provocative?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I was a bad boy. Oh, this is so bad. Okay, we actually had conversations with the effects department. We said, look, we've got all these torture scenes. There's two ways of doing it. One of which is we go for a whole lot of really expensive effects, which are probably not going to look good, or we get some people and torture them.
I like Caligula or something. You go for a real Salo or something.
So we actually went to it was in Germany and got some German DOMs and stuff.
Wow.
And we did some really messed up. So we actually
were they all contacts of Steven Dorff? He just got out his Rolodex. He's like, oh yeah, Germany, I got
that. I will not comment on that.
Guilt by silence.
So yes, there's some amazing CinemaScope footage that nobody's ever going to see. So,
but did the MPAA ever see it?
What's that?
Did the MPAA ever see it? Did you submit
it?
I made the choice to cut it myself before we ever even showed it to the studio. I said the studio's going to flip out if they see this.
I just wondered because I heard Friedkin talk about Cruising once, where he was saying he just shot all this extra porn because he knew that would be the first in the lining of fire, so he might be able to save the stuff he wanted to save. He shot all this extra bullshit. So I just wondered, okay, that's interesting. It's funny. Well, I haven't seen Fear.com since its release, so I actually do want to revisit it just out of curiosity.
We did a really big article on it in Fango, a year
you're
or so
very
ago.
kind to it, and I
Chris
appreciate
really likes that one.
They're very, it's funny because it's starting to take a little different turn than it started out, so...
Well, the atmosphere and set pieces, I do remember. It's just, I think I was saying, it's the internet stuff. Is that always, I find it's hard to get into a movie that deals with that for some reason. Somebody's got to crack it at some point.
Well, I mean, the internet's always changing. The technology moves so fast that by the time your movie comes out,
it's antiquated.
It's kind of like a product of that time period.
With the dial-up sound.
Could be 6 months ago.
In a way, it's a lot like rock and roll movies. The same problem. Rock and roll movies seldom succeed, except for Hard Day's Night. But I mean, just generally speaking, they don't do well.
Because it takes 2 years to make a movie, right? And then 2 years.
Everything can change.
Yeah.
What about the experience, briefly, about doing Masters of Horror? Because, it's almost been... it's almost been 10 years.
It has been. 2006 was Masters of Horror.
Well, mine was 2006. I think the first few were 2005. Yeah.
Wow. And I mean, you know what? That was a big deal when it happened. And even now, in retrospect, I revisited your episode before you came on, and Fair Haired Child, which is got another really cool creature in it. I don't know. I just think at the time, I think. People were, some people were stoked and some people were like, but it's a really cool thing. Mick is like, no matter what, we got together, we got all these different filmmakers and they all got to make an hour movie.
You got to give Mick a lot of credit. I mean, he set up a system where it was totally director based. So as long as you came in on time and on budget, you could do whatever you wanted to. You could and I always think it's like a perfect distillation. If you want to know about any of your directors, there it is, because they had complete creative, control, and so they could do whatever they wanted to do.
Did you have a favorite of the other films? The one that you kind of connected to?
Well, I really like Stuart Gordon's, the one he did in the second season, The Black Cat.
The Black Cat's perfect.
Yeah,
so
which I really liked, and I like Don Coscarelli's first one, the
incident.
That one's creepy.
And there's a number of them that I really like. So
I like yours a lot too. I mean, Lori Petty is such a. what would she like to work with? Because she's one of those actresses that I can't get a read on, no matter what movie I see her in. But she's always interesting.
Yeah, she's always committed to the roles, and that's what I loved about her. Actually, I originally had cast Alice Krige in that role.
I do love Alice Krige.
Yeah, that's who was going to play that part, and of course, that would have been a very different thing. Yeah. Now, Alice was tied up making.
Star Trek, the Borg, or was it?
The Silent Hill.
Oh, that's right.
The film you should have directed.
Right, yes.
that they stole.
and they kept her for a day longer, and that screwed me, because I had a dream of working with her. I always wanted to make a movie with her. And so then I was at sea going, well, who are we going to get? And I said, I need somebody who's really unusual. I said, what about Tank Girl? Let's go. I said, that's a completely, that couldn't be more divergent from Alice Creed, So she came on, and I thought she did a really amazing job, and she hadn't eaten in a long time, apparently. So she looked, she was very thin, and but she did a great performance, I think.
Yeah. Who was the young girl, the lead girl that played the Tara character?
Lindsay Pulsifer, yeah.
Yeah, because I don't recognize her in anything else, and I thought she was pretty terrific.
Oh, she was amazing. She actually, I had never heard of her, and she came in and just did a reading. And I remember I saw her on a Friday, and that entire weekend I couldn't get her out of my mind. I said, I've got to have her play this part. And she later went on and did what was the Hatfields and McCoys. And I think she was maybe nominated for something. Yeah, I really haven't paid attention since then, but she's really good.
Was she Canadian? Because I know. Did you shoot that season?
She's from Seattle, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did that shoot in Canada, the Masters of Horror stuff?
Yeah, we shot it in Vancouver. So
right.
Yeah, cool. And that was one of those things. When you're shooting a movie, sometimes sometimes everything goes against you. But that was a show where everything just went perfect. I mean, I couldn't have asked. I mean, the gods were on my side. I mean, there was scenes in the forest, and I woke up the morning and said, God, please, I need it to be misty and cloudy all day with like mist in the air. Get there, misty, cloudy. Thank you,
so
God.
God's in Canada. Right? That's where he's been all this time. He's just
and then that's true. See,
eating maple bacon.
And then there was a scene in the by the lake when the kid drowns, and I wanted to use the old effect of like the red filter, which would make the skies really dramatic. And I said, but to make that work, you have to have blue skies with puffy clouds. I said, please, I get there, blue skies, puffy clouds.
Beautiful.
And it ends right when we yell cut. And, I was like, thank you.
And then straight from that, when did you have the idea for Parasomnia? And when did you also decide to make something independently? I guess that's the shift from a studio to independent is really interesting.
Parasomnia, actually, I was writing at the same time I was shooting the Masters of Horror. In fact, which is why the same monster is sort of in because it's got that one creature, which I had done a bunch of different designs for it, and the one I used in Master Horror was sort of an earlier design because it was less elaborate, and I knew that K&B wouldn't have been able to do it within this time frame. And then when it came to Parasomnia, I'll just do it myself, and I'll spend as much time as I want. So, but anyway, so I was working on that at the same time.
But like that's at a point where people were making independent films. It's not like now where the cameras, it was so easy.
Sadly, what happened when we started, there was sort of like a normal thing that people thought, which was true, that if you made a movie for $1 million, $1.5 million, you were pretty safe. You could get your money back.
Right.
So that's what we did. We budgeted, I think $1.4 million. And by the time we finished it with the effects and everything else, it's like 2 years later, and the everything's collapsed.
The industry changed.
Everything collapsed, and the distributor, the first thing they sent out was Prince went to Brazil, and the next day it was on the internet for free. They were at my house, and
I don't like that story.
But like I say, I'm glad I made it.
Right.
Audiences seem to really dig the movie, and so.
Did you like the freedom of working completely?
Yeah,
in your own kind of bubble?
It's great, but of course horrifying too when you're spending your own money.
Right.
You only feel, you need to eat lunch, really.
So you're producing it as well, effectively, because it's your money.
You're the producer, and it's all, you're actually, the money's actually walking out of your pocket.
Right.
So it's a kind of a different effect. So.
Yeah, that does sound difficult.
Yeah, and it was a hard decision. Like there was a scene that I came to, and I said, I don't like the way this turned out. We got to reshoot it. And that's out of my pocket.
Right, that's on you. Yeah. So does it make you also more empathetic to all the producers you had to work with?
It did. Actually, it did. I actually called up Moshe, who produced Creature, and I called him up and I said, Moshe, I have a much greater respect for what you do now. So,
yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Now, are there films in that period between House and now that you tried to develop for a studio, couldn't happen, or?
Oh yeah, I mean, I had for a long time I had a script called Whispering Glades, which unfortunately has been sort of some of the same territory has been used in some other films and stuff, so I probably won't be able to do anything with that. It's one of my best scripts, and it's kind of sad that I'll never see that done. I got a big sci-fi project, which, at this point, I doubt that it'll get made. So I got, and then of course there was my project with H.R. Giger, The Mirror, which
what was that?
Yeah,
have you seen the documentary that's just been released about him?
No, I haven't. Actually.
I haven't seen it yet, but it's just heading now. Yeah, I think it's just coming out now.
Yeah. So Giger and I had this plan to do it was a thing called The Mirror, which was basically a mirror was a portal to another dimension. Where it was ancient machines that had taken over the civilization and stuff, and they were now trying to recreate their own, recreate humanity, but were doing a really fucked up job of it. So
interesting.
So it was a really cool project, and my notion was to take a lot of Giger stuff and just do it like full-blown Giger movie, just like see the big sets and I wanted to do it like on a larger scale than Alien. I wanted to really not CG, really sculpt it and make it big and, all that stuff. So.
When one's hanging with Giger, where exactly is one? Are you at his crazy abode? Well,
yeah, he had this series of flats that he sort of connected all together, and the walls were all painted black. And I'll tell you a couple of Giger stories.
I've heard a couple of weird stories.
Yeah. His paintings were stacked like maybe 5 feet against the wall. I mean, there would be that many of them.
Oh, wow.
Because he never sold his paintings. He just licensed them. He gave a few away to friends and did, I think, maybe sell 1 or 2, but mostly he kept everything. Huh. And he had like the alien in there and like his weird tables and all that stuff you've seen. And, and one day I was walking around. I spent about 10 days with him in Zurich. And one day I was walking around his place and I said, Giger, there's some holes in your painting over here. I said, somebody's damaged them. He goes, oh, no, that's from my girlfriend. She blew her brains out.
Oh, wow.
And and it was true. His girlfriend shot herself in front of the painting, and he kept it in as part of the painting. It's got her blood on it and stuff like that.
And you listeners at home thought you had problems.
Oh, my gosh.
But he also was
That's
like
an opium level of shit.
I know there was a long period where he was an addict. Was it opium or something that...
I don't know. He was mostly addicted to You'll Play Yogurt when I saw him.
Play yogurt? Yeah. I'm now picturing Giger with a little You'll Play cup.
Yeah, he'd go in this little room, and it would be all black in there, and he'd be spray painting and eating You'll Play Yogurt.
How did you get introduced to him? And how do you start a relationship with Giger?
Well, I had met him back on Alien days because we had licensed Dompo Studios had licensed the Facehugger. That was just as I was leaving the studio. And I had a chance to meet him, which I was very impressed by his art. Actually, I knew him before. I knew of his art before Alien because I was at a convention. This is probably a couple of years before Alien. And I picked up this book called an Necronomicon. And I remember my mind just was blown. And I got to have this book. And I bought it. And I remember spending 3 or 4 days just doing that, but just poring over his stuff and looking at it and stuff.
I wonder if they're going to create a museum of all. If he didn't sell his stuff, will it just be a giant museum?
I don't know. I think a lot of it's going to a museum. I think there's some kind of trust for it or
somewhere.
Somewhere
it's in Switzerland, right?
And Japan too, I think.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but I'll tell you another story. It was very funny. We would go to lunch and one day he took me to this is in Zurich, took me to a biker bar in Zurich. Now you got to remember, this is Swiss bikers. What would this be like?
I don't even know what that is.
Yeah. So we arrived there. He pulls up in front, and it's what you'd imagine. A bunch of Harleys and stuff. All parked out front. We go inside, and there's a bunch of really tough-looking guys in there. With all kinds of piercings and tattoos and stuff. And we're sitting there, drinking and having a little lunch. And I hear the guys talking, and they're speaking English. And I go, Giger, how come he liked to be just called Giger? I said, Giger, why are they speaking English? He says, but it's considered very hip to speak English if you're in a biker band, biker club. And I said, okay. And I start listening, and the guy, I swear to God, this is their conversation. The guy goes, Fritz, I think we should get some spray paint and go spray paint the sides of some buildings with our emblems. And the other guy goes, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's check with the police first and make sure this is okay.
That is so Swiss, right? It's like the dismiss Swiss culture. I'm very neutral about this. Wow, that's funny.
Yeah, let's check with the police.
I'm glad to hear he left his house and stuff, because in my mind, knowing very little about him, he's just this guy who's doing art in his house.
Yeah.
So it's cool to think of him in a biker bar. I
don't know. I kind of want him to do like a Yoplait commercial now. That's like needs to be the Yoplait commercial.
Did you see Jodorowsky's Dune?
I have not, and I'm dying to see it.
It's really fantastic. One of the best films I hear.
Yeah, I'm dying to see it.
But just all the stories about how O'Bannon and him, how it all kind of came together and left an imprint on the world regardless. I think you'll really enjoy it.
Yeah.
It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, he was an amazing guy, because we were sitting there working on The Mirror, and actually at that point we were working on Dead Star, which became Supernova. And we were going through these. He would like sit down and start drawing, and he'd draw so quickly. I'd have to go, no, stop, go back there. That one was really cool, And he'd be on to like 5 other drawings first before.
What the hell happened on Supernova? You can't just slip in Supernova. I remember seeing so many names on that film, like Francis Ford Coppola, Walter. I mean, I can't even. What was that?
Well, the development really was. I wrote a script called Dead Star, which was for Imperial Entertainment, as Shaw and those guys. And we had every intention of making it. But then they kept like saying, make it bigger and bigger. And finally it hit a point where I'm going, if it gets much bigger, they're not going to hire me. This is before I did the Crypt, and this is like in 89, I think.
Wow. So it took that long time to come to screen. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So, and that's exactly what happened. They finally just like let the thing slide. And then about the time House on Haunted Hill was happening, I was, quote, hot, and so my old script started selling, and that was one of them that got sold. And then they went on, they hired, I forget who was going to direct it originally, but they started doing rewrite after rewrite. And and also what had happened is a lot of the ideas of that script were knocked off by other people, because the script had been circulating Hollywood for a long time by that point. So most notably, I think Event Horizon, it was actually more like Event Horizon than the movie that got made.
Yeah, Event Horizon's better than, and so that makes sense. And it's darker, which makes sense with you.
Yeah, so it was a very dark, movie. The original idea was that there was an alien device that could transport you to hell. It was actually
that's kind of
that's pretty dark.
So you didn't have to die to go there. You could actually just go there. And
a long waiting list of those who want to do that.
And it was. I really liked that script a lot. But anyway, so it wound up getting made, and I got a lovely letter, actually, someplace from one time from Francis Ford Coppola saying, "We wish we'd stuck closer to your original script."
And was he the director by the end? Who was the director?
No, he was the
Walter
producer.
Hill?
I think he came in as producer, and I forget actually who.
I thought it was. Wasn't it like Walter Hill and then Jack Shoulder finished it?
Jack Shoulder was involved.
There's a few different people.
There's quite a few people that were on it. Yeah, there's a Scream Factory put out a Blu-ray of Supernova, believe it or not, and there's a pretty good doc that kind of goes through.
Okay, I'll have to watch that because I am curious about that.
Than the movie is.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Good people to have names next to.
Yes,
Walter Hill, you could do worse, right?
Yeah.
Did you know Walter Hill through Alien at all? Was there any connection?
Actually, it's funny because when I was working on, of course, Crypt, he was one of the producers, but I never saw him.
Right.
Yeah, and they used to joke that Walter Hill didn't really exist when we were making Crypt.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, there was word like last year that he was doing a remake of Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, and I was always just scratching my head like I could not imagine what that could be.
I don't know.
Walter
that
Hill
work
directed.
Today?
I think it's just Extreme Prejudice, but it's with the guys. I don't know.
Yeah, I subsequently met him, oddly enough, at a Directors Guild function.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah.
So what happens now? How will people be able to help if we're with the Kickstarter? And
Send money.
So what do you do? Are you going to take the money? Like, is it an all or nothing campaign?
It is. I thought about going Indiegogo, but the problem with Indiegogo, I couldn't, in good faith, take. If we don't get enough money to make the film properly, I couldn't just take the money and try and make a movie or whatever. For that amount of money. So that's why I went with Kickstarter, because it's an all or nothing thing. If we don't make it, then we don't make it, and I figure out some other way of making it. So.
Can you redo? I mean, I think the interesting thing that you're saying is that you learn halfway through. And I remember Stuart Gordon and those guys with Nevermore. It was a similar kind of thing where they're learning by doing, and then you almost need to do again.
Well, that's what Rob Zombie did. Yeah. Is they got some, and then they kind of figured out what to do, and then they launched again and got a lot more the second time.
Yeah, what would you do? What would you do? I mean, you're in the midway point, so it's not over, right? So it's like, what can you do differently than you did to start it?
Well, there's a lot of little tricks to it now that I've learned. There's things like, what people don't realize is there's actually, first of all, there's banks that'll lend you money on the Kickstarter campaign that you just go in, and it makes your Kickstarter campaign start off with a big bang. It looks like you've got.
I did not know this.
Yes, I didn't know this either.
Whoa.
So a lot of the things that you're seeing that there were huge successes is because somebody actually.
It's like matching it or something?
Well, it's not matching. They actually put the money in.
So you can go into a bank, say, give me $5,000, I'll pay you back.
Right. So when the Kickstarter's over, you pay them back. They get paid out of the Kickstarter money. So they actually are at no risk because, if you don't make your money, then they're not out anything. And if they do, they get the money. So it's like...
weird. Yeah. And then when you say banks, is this
it's not really.
bank,
I think it's like a loan, some kind of
loan shark kind of thing.
Yeah, lending.
Lenny, it's Lenny.
Yeah,
hey.
I think you go to a Taco Bell and ask for a lefty
lefty special, and it's a Kickstarter banker. An accountant comes up. No, that's really I've never heard this ever. So I'm like really interested.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I found out a lot of stuff. A lot of the campaigns that are successful, they already have money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
I have heard that.
And they're using the campaign to show, well, see the distributors, look, our movie was so successful, we got all this interest and people are putting big money. And
that's what I'd heard is that some people who already had, like for smaller films, if you've already got your 30,000, you launch the Kickstarter, get your 30,000 in 3 days. And then that's hype right there because you can say, yeah, we got our Kickstarter done in 3 days. We are that popular. And you've become your own press machine.
Yeah. So that's what it's about. So, and I didn't know any of this until actually a few days ago.
Right. Yeah. Because you just wanted to do it. That's really
just kind of a babe in the woods,
You should still donate, regardless of what.
Yeah, and watch. I watched the teaser and the interviews before, and they look. I mean, it looks like a real movie that's being made. You know what I mean? It doesn't look like. That's the thing. That's why you and Indy, in my mind, I just want to see you with. I want somebody to give you huge budgets.
Yeah,
from your lips to God's ears.
Yeah, exactly. And I can honestly,
listen. Honestly, I owe a great debt to Fangoria because. Part of the way I got House on Haunted Hill was the fact that after that Crypt episode, the first one, Fangoria got on board and they said you got to give this guy a major feature,
Yeah.
And actually, I just got an email a couple of days ago about Thallium's box, and immediately I was like, "This needs to go up, man!" So we've been pumping that one too.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah, and it is cool that so many people are remembering House for what it is, and I think unlike a lot of the remakes that don't, the test of time doesn't really work for them. That film I saw maybe a year ago was saying it comes on TV, and I'll always watch it from scratch because it really is also just entertaining, like really fun to watch.
I'm hoping someday I get a chance to do a director's cut because there was stuff in there that that got cut. Or that could have been better. That
they still have the elements?
Yes. The whole zombie thing got cut out, which really wasn't my doing. And,
which studio is that for?
Warner's.
Okay.
And if they do a Blu-ray version, I'd love to do and put that stuff back in.
It could be a question we could ask the Screen Factory guys when they come, right?
Yeah, I don't know if somebody could license from Warner's, but I don't think
so. I think it's Warner's got to do it. Yeah, because Warner's Home Video is going to do it.
Yeah,
if they're going to do it. But so
did you ever watch dare I ask? Did you ever watch the sequel? Because they sequelized your movie.
I did watch it. They shot it in Czech Republic no, I think it was actually Romania or Bulgaria or someplace, which I think hurt the movie because you didn't have those same elements and stuff. But
Combs was the best part of coming.
Yeah.
But I remember there was a gimmick. I can't. I mean, this is back when there was Blu-ray and HD. Was kind of fighting for dominance. So I don't remember which format they did this for, but the cool thing was that they shot multiple scenes and endings. And the Blu-ray, or maybe it was the HD, was a choose-your-adventure movie. Like, you could decide which direction that movie goes in because they already shot multiple versions of scenes and stuff like that.
Right.
But I can't remember. Like, that was the only movie that I have heard try that gimmick in the middle of that Blu-ray HD war.
I was trying to get Warner's to actually, when House on Haunted Hill came out, I was actually trying to get them to put out like 2 different endings without telling anybody.
And see which one's playing a different
time. Well, no, just play them, and then so people would go, well, wait a minute, that's not what happened.
Yeah.
Oh, and I feel like some movies have done that in history because in your mind it's one way and someone else. Yeah, that's interesting.
Well, Clue, I think Clue just did they released all 3 of them.
Right.
Well, when it came to home video.
Yeah.
But in theaters, they had 3. It was a different ending.
Yeah.
In theaters,
Oh, okay. Good.
There's a play it's a musical, I think, called Edwin Drood, which actually is based off a play or a story. But yeah, it's got the different endings, and depending on what night you go to see it, you'll get all these different endings.
Oh, cool.
People can argue.
Cool.
But yeah, it's a really cool.
Was there any other William Castle that had you had the choice to do any other William Castle project? Is there something you could have imagined knocking out of the park?
No, but there was. I always lived at. What was the name of the book? It was another book that The Haunting was based on.
The Robert Wise one. I don't know.
I always lived in a castle, I think it was called.
I talked about that on the show last week. We've always lived in the castle.
We've always lived in the
I
castle.
talked about that
did,
last week because I was asked at Texas Frightmare, I was on a female panel, and somebody was like, what book would you guys make? And all 3 of us agreed we've always lived in the castle is our dream film to make. And I talked about it last week because it's got Bava stole the shock cover from the original
right.
We've Always Lived in a Castle book cover. And and I talked about it because Michael Douglas owns the rights because I already looked into it.
The other thing was Mr. Sardonicus, which of course was
and that one has the choose your own.
Yeah.
Of course, it never really was a choose your own. It always just played out, but
it
was the illusion of it.
But that was one I always thought you could make a really cool movie out of that, So
because you got to choose the fate of Mr. Sardonicus at the end, what happened to him.
Yeah.
So that was a fun one.
Well, thank you so much for coming aboard.
For joining us.
Thank you so
Sharing
much
all
for
these stories
having
with
me. I
us.
appreciate it. And,
a lot of fun.
I want to thank your support.
Yeah.
If you enjoyed listening to the show, he wants $1 per minute of the show donated to the Kickstarter. You work that out.
Yeah.
3 hours into our show.
Yeah,
Right?
every entertaining minute.
By the way, all you people in Europe who bootlegged Parasomnia, send me $10.
You owe him.
And the Brazilian government basically owes you. Yeah, thanks very much for coming. And I think it will. And we've actually explained the shaky ghost shot. So
which kind of made
else.
my day because it's completely not what I thought it was. But it made it even cooler now because now I'm going to go back and watch it and be like, holy shit, that scene took 5 minutes to shoot.
It was a lot cooler when it was shot on film.
Yeah.
And nowadays when people are doing it digitally, it's a lot less cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you so much.
Yep, we'll see you next week.
All right.
Thanks.